Do you think your dream house extension is going to cost you a fortune and you're not sure if you're ready to make that big investment just yet? Here's the truth. You might be wasting thousands of pounds right now without even realizing it. I'm Jane Leach. I'm an award-winning UK registered chartered architect. And in this video, I'm going to show you how you can budget smarter for your house extension without throwing money away and risking your big dream extension. If you're just starting to consider extending your home, or you might be stuck already in this kind of safe spend trap, this video is what you need so that you know how you can extend your home with confidence. I'm going to walk you through not just how to budget for a house extension, but also how to avoid some classic costly mistakes that many homeowners make before they even get started working with an architect. So let's dive in. So here's what I see so often. Homeowners who have got these big dreams, big ideas for this house extension that they would love to do. They might not be quite sure yet exactly if they want a rear extension or a side extension or a loft conversion or a single story or a two-story. All these things are all sort of questions going around in their mind, and they're not quite clear on those things yet. But what they can be completely convinced about, and this may be you too, is that it's going to cost a lot of money. The fear is that you spend all that money and you end up not being really happy with the results. And so what I see all the time is homeowners, and I'm a bit reluctant to say this because I don't want you to feel like you're being criticized here if this is you. This is very, very common. It's like a very normal thing to do. And what I see is homeowners who want that big extension, but because that's just way too scary and they're not quite sure if they can afford it just right now, they start to make smaller improvements that might be things like, well, we'll just replace some of the windows or all of the windows, or we'll just get everywhere redecorated and replace the carpets. Everywhere will feel lovely and fresh and nice, and we'll be able to live with it for a while like that. Or we'll just get the kitchen refitted, and that's the problem area. We'll sort that out and everything will be fine. Or just the bathroom, we'll get the new bathroom fitted. And these things are lovely ways to improve your home. But if what you really need is a big house extension, then this is just like scratching an itch, and it's not going to get you the result that you really want. And here's the problem with those sorts of spends. Whilst they seem a lot smaller and they're a lot less overwhelming than that big extension, there's still a lot of money. You could be spending tens of thousands on these home improvements, money that you could put towards that house extension and get the result that you really want, instead of wasting it on some of these smaller improvements like new carpets. New carpets are just going to be the first things chucked in the skip once you start on site. And so if you want to make spend in this short term, it's good to be really smart and clear about how you're going to make those spending decisions. So you might be stuck there feeling like, well, we can't afford, or we're not quite ready to do that big extension. So what we'll do instead is we'll make some smaller improvements to our home so that we can just enjoy it in the meantime while we're building ourselves up, whether that means saving up some more money or building up the courage, or just getting your head clear around what it is you actually want to do or what's going to be the best result for you. And so it's a case of like spending bits of money where it's going to actually have an impact and where it's not going to go to waste. So I'll give you some examples. I worked with a client, this is many years ago now, one of my earlier clients, and they had bought this beautiful house, gorgeous house, conservation area, 1930s kind of garden village type property, beautiful. And they'd moved in, they'd lived in it for a little while, and then the kitchen was falling apart. It wasn't really functional and it wasn't very nice. So they ripped it out and had a new kitchen fitted. Everything exactly the same positions as where, you know, the sink where it was, the cooker where it was, all the bits in the same places as it had been previously. Just a straight replacement, refit kitchen in the same positions. But what they really wanted was a more open plan kind of space. And this was a very traditional 1930s type property with a relatively small kitchen, although it was actually quite a luxurious kind of house, quite large living rooms, quite large bedrooms, lots of space, very generous garden, actually beautiful garden. But the kitchen was really quite small, just had a window to the side of the house, you know, looking onto the side wall of the neighbours, no view of the garden from the kitchen, completely isolated kitchen, not a very big one, and it just didn't feel that great to live in. But they refitted the kitchen thinking that was going to make it all feel better. When they got me to start working, to have a look at this for them and explore different options of what we could do to improve their home, what they were thinking was they needed to extend. They needed to do a big extension to make this work. And actually, they didn't really need to do a big extension, but they did need to reconfigure the space. Had they not done their kitchen, then that wouldn't have been an issue, because they could have just ripped out the kitchen and reconfigured the space and refitted a new kitchen. And sort of with only a little bit more work than the work that had gone into fitting a new kitchen, they could have created everything that they really were hoping to achieve with an extension, which they didn't need. They didn't need to extend at all. They just needed to reconfigure the space inside. So this was and the issue was that now they had this new kitchen in that space. And so although they wanted to extend and make a big change, they also had just spent a lot of money on a new kitchen. And so there was this kind of contradiction, a kind of a tension between what they wanted to do going forward and what they'd already done. And they'd already spent tens of thousands on a new kitchen, and they were thinking, well, we're gonna have to just rip that all out in order to create this extension that we want, with a completely new kitchen, a completely new configuration. Ultimately, I did show them how we could redesign the space that they had. We could improve it in a way that they could make just a few minor modifications to their kitchen in order to make it work and create the open plan type of space that they wanted. They didn't have to kind of throw away the whole kitchen. I don't know how much they spent exactly on it, but maybe 20,000-30,000 they'd spent on fitting the kitchen. And they were thinking, well, we'll build an extension. I mean, bear in mind, this is like 10-15 years ago. Prices were lower at that point, and they were thinking, well, we've got another 20,000-30,000 pounds to spend on a single story extension. So they'd spent a similar amount of money on refitting the kitchen to what they were thinking of spending on an extension. If they put those two together, they could have had 50,000 pounds to spend on the whole project, and had a much bigger impact, created a much better result. But they'd already spent money on something that they actually were thinking of just ripping out and throwing away. So this is where it's very easy to spend big chunks of money thinking that that's going to solve the problem, and actually it just creates this barrier to you then actually being able to solve the problem, and takes away the money that you want to be spending on your dream extension. In contrast with that, you could take the example of another client of mine who I worked with a bit more recently, and they had a kitchen that was a bit tired. They knew that they wanted to extend and do some bigger works. So what they did was they kept the kitchen that they had. They had someone come in and professionally give it a good deep clean, like steam clean all of the appliances and everything. So everything was really clean and hygienic. Fronts, they got them all spray painted, so it was all a different color to uplift it, give it a bit of fresher look without ripping out the kitchen and replacing it. And that meant that they were happy to live with that kitchen as it was for a couple of years while they got themselves sorted, figuring out the extension, getting that in play, They could just spend hundreds rather than the thousands on upgrading that kitchen. And if you think about it, it's a bit like cost per wear. If you think about the value of that, so you're spending maybe 1,000, maybe 2,000 on freshening up a kitchen, making it look better, and that's, you're going to be maybe thinking about that being in place for another year or two, maybe 3, while you get yourself sorted, figure out what you really want to do with your extension, make sure you've got your money in place, whether that's refinancing something or remortgaging or whatever it is, whatever your plan is to raise the funds to be able to do your house extension. Money that you're spending is really like, say, £2,000 or so. You're splitting that over the course of 2 or 3 years, so it's less than £1,000 per year that you're going to be enjoying it. Whereas if you go ahead and rip out the whole kitchen and replace it for, let's say, a budget kitchen, £10,000–15,000, over £5,000 per year, and the value per use is way less with a new kitchen than it is with just doing it up and spending those smaller amounts of money so that you can put more of your money into your bigger dream project. It's a bit like when you buy a new dress for a special occasion and you compare the cost of wear of that dress, where you've just worn it once and then you maybe don't want to wear it again. Compare that to buying a pair of jeans that you wear like every weekend, and they may cost the same amount in terms of buying it, but the cost per wear is way less. So you can think about the value of things that you do to your home in a similar way, like how much time are you going to get to enjoy it? And so think about the cost per use, or the cost per day to you, or the cost per year, in terms of how much you're going to get out of that, and is it really worth it? And here's the thing that I want you to really take away from this, is that spending money on those intermediate types of projects where you're thinking, okay, we can't stand the kitchen as it is right now, we've got to do something about it, so, but we're not ready to do the extension, so we'll just do the kitchen. Doing that can really prevent you from then achieving what you really want, and it's just delaying. It's a delaying tactic because you're afraid of going ahead and spending money and putting your mind to that bigger project. It's too overwhelming, it's scary, but we can manage this kitchen. The kitchen is something that we can get our head around. We can figure out, is it a shaker style unit, is it a gloss modern finish, what kind of style of kitchen is it, how many units, and so on. You can get your head around that. It's way easier. Fewer decisions, lots of decisions still to make, but fewer decisions than you need to make for a bigger project. And so it's this kind of putting off the inevitable, because that kitchen refit it may or it may not, and that's for you to decide. But if that kitchen refit is going to solve all your problems and you're going to love your home and you're going to be able to enjoy that then for the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, however long it is you're planning to live in your home, then that's great. Go ahead, replace your kitchen. But if what you really know you need to do is build an extension, change the shape and the configuration and the amount of space that you have, then that 10, 15, 40,000 pounds that you're spending refitting your kitchen is not necessarily going to be money well spent. It may just be money wasted, a big cost of use, big cost compared to just tarting it up a little bit and living with it in not such a great condition or not to your ideal standard for the short term, so that you can put all your focus and your effort onto the bigger dream project that's actually going to sort everything out for you, give you that ease, that pleasure on a daily basis that you really wanting to achieve. Here's the thing with piecemeal renovations: each little thing that you spend on adds up, but it might not really add any value, because if you're going to replace your carpets, you could easily spend 3,000 to 5,000 replacing all your carpets. Kitchen refit, 10 to 40,000 easily, depending on the size, materials, quality. They don't solve any of those space flow issues, and they're going to be one of the first things that gets either damaged or just ripped out and chucked in the skip as soon as you do start your big project. What I recommend instead of doing that, instead of doing small piecemeal projects without an idea of what you're really going to aim for, what you can do smaller projects. If that's what's going to work best for you and your family, your busy lifestyle, your cash flow, you can do your project in stages, but know what it is that you're aiming for. And this is where I recommend that you have a kind of a holistic vision of what the end result is that you're aiming, what your goal is, where you're heading towards, so that if you know you're going to be reconfiguring your kitchen and you're going to look at building an extension, you don't refit the kitchen, you just kind of tot it up and make it bearable for the short term, and put the money that you would spend on refitting the kitchen into that bigger project instead. But say, for example, your plan is to extend a single story ground floor extension at the back, for example, then perhaps it does make sense to replace the windows to the front of the house or refit carpets in the bedrooms upstairs. They're not going to be touched, then that's a good place to spend your money in the short term, so you've got spaces that you can enjoy more, and your whole house will gradually get to that point where you've got a whole house that you love. So you don't have to save up everything and not do any improvements until you do your one big project. I'm not saying that you have to do that. I'm just saying if you've got a vision, a clear vision that takes into account everything within your house, all the things that you want to do, then you can know very clearly what upgrades you can make and in which stages you can make them, so that when you come to do the next thing, it's not going to need to be ripped out. It's not going to end up in the skip. You're not chucking money away that's just going to be thrown out. You're spending your money in places where it's going to make a difference, and it's going to make a difference over the long term, and you're really going to get the most out of the money that you've spent, and you're going to have plenty of money left aside for the bigger projects that are going to be more meaningful for you, rather than spending on all these little small upgrades that all add up and then not having enough money to be able to do what you really want to do in the end. So this is what I do with my clients in what I call the big picture plan. This is a concept design package. I help you to create a holistic vision and then explore multiple options very quickly of how you can achieve that, and look at, if we stage it, what we do, different stages. This gives you a full picture that you can then use to guide your home improvement. It'll make it clear how you can split the work up into stages so you can minimize disruption to your life. Like, who wants to live in all the dust? You can minimize all of that. You can spread the cost out over several years if that's what you need to do and that's what works best for you. And you can make improvements in line with your biggest priorities. If your biggest problem right now is that the front living room is freezing cold in the winter and you just can't use it, then maybe replacing the windows with a higher performance windows. If you've got a lovely big bay, for example, with traditional timber sash windows and stained glass windows, you maybe don't want to rip it out, but then you can get them refurbished, draft proofed. You can upgrade them. You could get secondary glazing installed. You can do what you need to do to that room, that place, to make that an enjoyable space that you can enjoy. If that is something that you're not then going to be changing in your bigger plan of all the changes overall, that could then help go towards that, and you can get an immediate improvement, an immediate benefit. So without that vision, it's really easy to just waste money on those changes that don't matter, that you have to undo later on or end up in the skip. Whereas with the big picture plan, even if you're doing the build in stages, you know where you're heading and you know how each step that you take is taking you towards that end goal. So that holistic vision, that exploration of multiple different options, and then a feasibility practical check of which of those design ideas is going to work best for you, is going to meet all your priorities, deliver what you really need and want from your home. That's your end goal, and then you can look at splitting that into the stages that are most manageable for you. Maybe you just want to go for the whole thing at once. Maybe you want to do it in stages. You can decide. That's all doable, but having that bigger picture view of what you're aiming for is what's going to help make it possible to do that without throwing tens of thousands of pounds away on small intermediate upgrades that just don't add up. You don't need a completely limitless budget for your project. You just need to know very clearly what to budget for and the things that you're looking to achieve. So you can look at ballpark costs figures for, and this is now in 2025, you're looking at, and it varies depending on where in the country you are. Sort of if you're closer to London, it's going to probably cost you higher costs per square meter than in other parts of the country. So this is just a finger in the air estimate, ballpark figure type cost idea. You can look at a cost per square meter somewhere between like £2,500 to £3,000 is quite a good starting point to just give you an idea. You're looking, for example, at building an extension that is say 3 meters by 6 meters, just for argument's sake, so 18 square meters. And you could sort of look at a ballpark figure of say £3,000 per square meter. So that's 18 square meters times 3, which gives you £54,000. So that would give you a budget of £54,000 for an extension of that sort of size. This kind of ballpark figure is very indicative. There are so many detailed decisions that can vary the cost of that. You know, what quality of fixings, fittings, if it's got a bathroom or a kitchen within that space, that's going to bump the price up massively. If it's a very simple space, then it may be that you can get that for a lower cost per square meter. There's so many variables, but I sort of start with a rough cost per square meter. It's just a good starting point. Then have a rough idea of the kind of ballpark figure that you're thinking of. It's not accurate until you get more detail down the line, but it just gives you a good starting point. Then you've got to think about professional fees. You know, if you want to work with an architect, if you need an engineer, if there's going to be structural alterations made, if you're going to submit for planning, if you're going to submit full plans, building control, all these different things, and what type of contractor you're going to employ. If you're going to do any of the work yourself, if you've got your own trade skills and you're going to be able to DIY some of this work, you know, all of these professional fees, there is obviously a fee attached to each of those, and everybody is different. You also need to factor in VAT. That's another 20% on top of the cost of your construction. And then you're also looking at, you know, all these detailed fixtures and fittings. It can be really worthwhile having a spreadsheet, putting down all your sort of ideal things that you want to have, looking at what they are. If it's flooring, for example, you can have direct comparisons of cost per square meter for different types of flooring, and you can decide, you know, what sort of ballpark figure you're prepared to pay, and then look for materials and products that fit within that ballpark figure that you can then get your budget within your budget. And then always have a contingency, 10 to 20% minimum, so that, here's the thing, a lot of the time, if the explorations, early on stage explorations, which I do within the big picture plan with you, I explain how to check things out so that you really have a better idea of possible risks and costs that could come up that you can then factor into your overall plan. If you have 10 to 20% to deal with anything that can come up, When you're working on an existing building, then it's quite often that something will happen that you're not expecting. Maybe some asbestos is found that needs to be dealt with. That can be costly. Maybe the structural design doesn't take into account the fact that actually that wall is not solid. It's a much smaller, thinner, less robust wall than was thought, and maybe you need to add in an extra pillar and a bit of a foundation pad for that pillar to be able to provide the structural support that's needed. Or it could be that your drains are deeper than you thought and you didn't realize. That can mean that you end up pouring lots more concrete down into the ground, and that's actually where most of the unexpected costs are going to arise, is within the first few weeks of construction in the ground. And it's very disheartening because you're spending all your contingency early on and not seeing any results for it. But if you have done some due diligence, if you have explored some of the risks early on, then you can use that knowledge to budget accordingly. And then if you also have your contingency fees set aside, then if you don't have to spend it during the build, or not as much of it, then you can spend it on all the nice things afterwards. You can get a bigger TV, you can get a fancier sofa, you know, all these nice things that you can get. All the soft furnishings and fittings that you want, you can then use any contingency that you have left over to spend on that. But I advise you have like a bit extra, have a good chunk of contingency and a little bit more, just to make sure that you're safe. So like I said, I do help my clients within the big picture plan package. I help to identify possible risks and then gather the information that's necessary to help inform us about the possibilities. For example, one thing that I always recommend, especially if you own an older home built before 1990, then I recommend that you get a full refurb and demolition survey carried out, because I have so many times we've had asbestos discovered in places where we wouldn't have known. For example, one client had a beautiful Victorian villa, and one of the bedrooms had an asbestos kind of plaster sort of covering to the ceiling. No idea that was asbestos. We had been considering turning that small bedroom into a bathroom, and because of the asbestos, and it's safe to leave asbestos in place if you're not going to be making any changes, you can leave it there. What we decided was that it would be a better use of their money to create their new bathroom in another place and leave that untouched. It meant that they could save their money not having to deal with asbestos, and they could still get what they wanted in another way. So that's where knowing and understanding possible risks very early on can really help you identify what might happen, and then what could you do to avoid that being a risk. Other things that you can do are get test trial holes dug down next to foundations to see how deep your existing foundations are. That's really important especially if you've got, say, a garage and you're looking at building over. Your garage and the existing foundations might not be enough, and so it's good to know that early on if that's going to be a problem, because then you can change the design to take that into account, and you can do something else so that you're not having to spend money where you don't want to spend it. Usually you don't want to spend lots of money on pouring concrete into the ground because you can't see it. It's not going to benefit you having that. Sometimes it's what you have to do, but if you don't have to and you can achieve the same results without having to do that, then that's way better for you, and it's going to really protect your budget to spend on the things that are really going to make a difference, that you're really going to be able to enjoy and appreciate on a daily basis, rather than just a load of concrete in the ground. We've talked about how to build your project in phases, what sorts of things you need to consider when you're budgeting, how to avoid spending money on making improvements that think about the cost per use. These are the things that I really urge you to take away from this video that you don't rush into making what seem like small spends, but actually they're like 10, 20, 30, 40,000 pounds. You actually could then end up just throwing away, skipping that stuff. Save that bigger chunks of money and look at, you know, really what can you do for really small amounts of money just to make things enjoyable and bearable. Or if you have a big holistic plan, you know what it is you're aiming for, and you know that this room is never going to be touched. This is a room where you can redecorate it, you can put down new carpets, you can replace the windows, you can do what you like to that room, you can really enjoy it, you're going to be able to enjoy it forevermore. And it's not going to be affected by that big project that you're planning. That's a place to spend your meantime money in order to enjoy your home that bit more while you're waiting for the big project that you're aiming for ultimately. Make sure you have a good contingency. Make sure you've accounted for all the different types of costs that you're going to come across within your construction, and only make big permanent upgrades in the areas that you know are not going to change. And then if you need to work in a phased way, taking it step by step, if you have a holistic vision, you have an overall view, concept, plan, a design for what it is you're going to do, you know where you're going to extend, you know what needs to change, which spaces need to be reconfigured, which wall is coming down, which door is going to be moved. Once you have that structure, that design guidance in place, then you can split things up very easily and make your spends in line, knowing that you're building up to the result that you ultimately want to get, and you're not just throwing money away because you're too scared to go for the big dream that you want. And actually you're just doing these to kind of, because it's a little bit more manageable and it's a little bit less scary. But just be careful with that. You're not spending your money and throwing it away. If this has been interesting and useful, comment below. What are you stuck with when it comes to budgeting? If you would like to work with me as your architect to create this holistic vision, explore all your options and check the feasibility and look at the possible risks and get the information that you need to try to put those into account, take a look at the link below where you can find out more about the big picture plan. So there you go. Now you know how to budget for your dream house extension, how you can avoid losing money on unnecessary or wasted efforts and wasted upgrades. If you're still feeling stuck, you're still feeling a bit anxious about getting started, that's totally understandable. It's one of the biggest things that holds many homeowners back. It's not really having the money. It's not about that so much as just the fear and the overwhelm of achieving that project. So if you're kind of, you recognize that you're kind of, really want to extend your home, but actually, yeah, maybe money is an issue, but actually you're just scared of getting it all wrong, or there's something else that's holding you back. In the next video, I'm going to walk you through a really powerful and simple exercise that you can use to help you figure out what is it that's really holding you back and how can you overcome that to move your project forward. Best wishes with your home designs, and I'll see you again soon.